some biographical details, but I think the information on the network website is intriguing enough, I would say. Alan Garfield is chair of the Computer Graphics and Interactive Media Department at the University of Dubuque, in Dubuque, Iowa, USA, of course. It says that his formal education is eclectic. He has a BA from the University of Iowa, an MA from the State University of New York at Binghamton. He did postgraduate work at Wadham College in Oxford. Well, if that is eclectic, I think that his interests are also eclectic and quite diverse. He has recently published on 2D and 3D animation algorithms, on images in contemporary politics, on 19th century French philosophies, Holocaust studies, and Beat Generation poetry. He also manages to teach in Iowa and to live in Ireland, which I also find pretty intriguing. And perhaps he can explain later how he does that. But he will first take us on a pilgrimage to the Beat Museum. Alan, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me load this up. Thank you. Check the time. Well, good morning. How are you? Good. It's been great, hasn't it? This conference. I think Jaap and Martin said it really well, and I've been blown away by the whole thing, and so I'm leaving. No, that's true. But it's really nice to be at the end of a 3-day conference where you can reflect a little bit on what you've seen. And I think you're all doing this, and that's the chat I hear over the coffee or the beers. To me, there have been 3 themes running. Oh, by the way, this is not part of my paper. I just thought I'd share this. To me, there are 3 themes running through this conference. We'll see if you agree or not. But I think they're relevant to what I want to talk about. The first theme that I have seen thus far is an extraordinary evidence of creativity of interpretations of the beats, both variety and in range. And that has to do, I think, explicitly with methodology. I've seen a number of you, and I don't know if it's a European methodological difference from an American methodological difference, or nationalism, or how that's gone, but just immense creativity. And number 2, another theme, it seems to me, is it's put us in a place that I think we have no idea what's going to happen in beat studies. We have no idea how this whole thing is going to play out. I mean, just think for a minute. If you teach, and in the States if it's 4 years, or in Europe if it's 3 years, and so for an undergraduate, and then maybe another 4 years for graduate school, so 8 years. 8 years from now, in 2020, how will you be teaching beats? We have no idea. I think this conference shows us we don't have any idea, because we're still developing that methodology. And the third theme, it seems to me, is I've seen extraordinary capability that we have to examine the beats in our own particular perspectives. You know, whether it was Alan Ray doing a creative reading of Baum with some video that he put in here, or what we're going to see with Davis this evening, or in this case, in my perspective, which, as you see, I'm a chancer up here, because this is not my area. I deal with 2D and 3D animation, and I deal with web design and really interesting technologies. But I love the beats. Today we're going to do a little pilgrimage. I call it the journey to beat literature. And I don't know how many of you have been to San Francisco or not, and so you're going to be there today, at least for about 10 minutes or so. In the 1950s, the beats were, of course, the only new cultural game in town. Well, that's what Bruce Cook wrote. He was the writer in the short-lived National Observer. He went on to record that idea in his history, The Beat Generation, that was published in '71, fairly early. And why not? Cook was at or near the Beats throughout most of their permutations. And he examined the sources, the iconography, the so-called golden epic and its later influences, later, that is, until 1971. And even if you don't agree with Cook when he pronounced the Beats the only game, inferring it was the only revolutionary game aimed directly at military and industrial complex and consciousness, he might be forgiven for trying to impose a somewhat artificial order on the chaos of those purebreds that we've heard about today. In the wider sense, of course, the Beats have never stopped. This conference is just but one indication of that. The golden nugget might be gone just as the heroic phase of surrealism came and went, mostly before anyone in this room was born. But the style and its pervading influences, well, that clearly lives on. How does it live on? Or more particularly, how with 21st century technology innovation do we see and interpret the Beats? I mean, do the Beats really do social networking well? Clay Shirky, in his 2008 book, Here Comes Everybody, is not the only one, though he may be one of the loudest, to suggest that advances in technology and social media enable new kinds of groups to form a voice. It simply wasn't present until recently. And this we all know too well. Yeah, in 2012, we are more interconnected and active than ever. But when I saw someone reading on the road on their Kindle, it bothered me. You see, I think we lose a little of its kryptonetic power if we don't see a cultural movement's environment and its artifacts. I think those are prime objects. I mean, look, if you want to understand the Quattrocento, you really should walk amongst the stones of Florence to understand how Masaccio worked or Michelangelo worked. It's not less true with beat writers. So this is my short presentation. Beats and their objects in one particular place in one particular time. So all this globalization notwithstanding, the beat culture has been intimately connected geographically all over the place, as is obviously here in Europe, but primarily New York and San Francisco, that golden time. Okay, so you've read the stuff, but how many of you have been to Ferlinghetti's City Lights? A few less. This presentation focuses on the story of the Beats from the standpoint of the only museum dedicated to the Beat generation, the Beat Museum. There you go. This is the entrance in 540 Broadway in San Francisco. So I'm going to present to you what is there now, and as these things go, don't hit me. You may or may not like what you see, but I think you need to see how the Beats are being presented to those who are so thoroughly infused as you are in the writing, etc. Well, here is the Beat Museum, and as you go up Columbus there, there's City Lights on the left, and on the right of the Crossway of Broadway is the Beat Museum. Okay. Yeah, some of you will recognize the names of the restaurants. Yes.
Just to say that being available does research book actually just next door to the Beat Museum.
Oh.
Talking about the carrying on.
Excellent. I had no idea. I brought a group of students there because it was a game technology conference, and so I was there, and I took off as I usually do from a conference, and I asked my students if they'd like to go to the Beat Museum with me, in which case they kept on walking up to North Beach, and forget that. So, but that's it. I don't know if you can see it, but this fellow down here, I think he's been there since 1950. No, I didn't pose him. He's a panhandler, and he's there, and he'll gladly take your money and chat with you. And he knew they'd do it. But this is the corner as you're walking up the street to City Lights, which of course is a little more cleaned up now than it was in the past. This is from across the street. He was right there. Notice the tour buses go right by. So take your pictures of any beats or any weird people who call them beats, as you see. The Beat Museum itself is right here, sandwiched handily in between the porno shops and various eating and liquor place, and of course, to really give it a negative environment, as you see right here, there's a law studio right there. There's a law shop, so you know it's really the sleazy area at that point. And here you go for your entranceway. A lot of handmade posters, and you walk right. Oh, I wanted to show you, there is a website. Jerry Cimino is the one who owns it. He's the owner and curator. He owns everything there, so it's the Beats according to Jerry. It's an interesting little website, and the website is Kerouac.com. You can go up and take a look at it. And but here you are in the museum. Now, the museum is 2 rooms on the first floor, a hallway, which is decorated all the way through as you walk up and try not to trip up, and then an upstairs area. It's not that large, but it's got lots of stuff. And if this sort of looks like your great aunt Gertrude's living room, it has that feel to it. It's got more tchotchkes than you could ever throw a stick at. As you see here. This, I assume, is supposed to be kind of a model of the bridge, of the Golden Gate as you walk on through. And when you look at this, you're just wowed immediately. Don't forget, this is the face of what the Beats are for most American students, or most Americans when they go through, and they've heard about the Beats but don't have a friggin' clue what that actually means. So here you go. There's a turnstile right down here, and a little notice of how much it costs. And by the way, it costs $8 US to go in if you are a senior or a student. They don't say what a senior is, but in the States it's typically 62 or older. But senior student, it's $5. So it's definitely affordable. And you walk in, you're outside of it here, so you can see all the nice things that you can buy. Beats tended, in this museum, the Beats are defined by things you can buy as well, lots. And then we walk on in. Now, in the first room, as you see things hanging from the, wherever there's space, this is again a good example of the Latin horror vacui, the fear of open spaces. Everything is placed around there, and on the left and the right, and then you go through this door, in case you didn't see it, that's the door. And you go, and there's a rolling film on the right-hand side in this room, and then the stairs upstairs. Getting closer to the so-called movie theater. The stairs upstairs, and this is the stairs upstairs with a lot of accoutrement from the Beat generation. Lots of stuff. There are no tours, and there are no open tours. And then you go downstairs, and now we're going to go actually in the entranceway itself, as you see right here, and we pay the fellow at the desk and go through the turnstile. And just in case you didn't know, here is a paragraph that will totally define who the Beats are, and you can't read it from here. By the way, nothing is documented as to where it comes from, if it comes from various books, if it's Cimino's own personal view, and it definitely tends towards the more literary, but it tells very little about it. The first thing you see when you walk on through is this decoupage unit right here, and as you can barely see here, it says, it all began with, and drum roll, or in this case horn, playing Neil Cassidy. And we have some images here I'll show you in a minute, but first, this decoupage right there, so you recognize all the boys put together and some of the names, etc. Which is rather confusing, but because you can't read it. Maybe it's perhaps one of the most authentic of the Beat kind of interpretive things there. But we move right on over, and here is our horn, and it immediately relates the Beats to jazz. Beats equals jazz. And in case you want to know, there's Charlie Parker and some others. And we have Neil Cassidy, and nice little explanations here. Or not nice, depending on what you want. Who was Neil Cassidy? Well, here he's related. Neil Cassidy is that key fulcrum between the Beats and the hippies. Don't forget it's San Francisco. And so trying to explain what this is. Whoops, I'm sorry. Here's a nice little head design from the Travels, right next to Neil Cassidy. On the other side of that is this little device that certainly most younger American students would not have a clue what it is. It's called a mimeograph machine. It was the internet of the 40s. And in case you don't know how it works, here's an explanation in great detail on how that worked and how then the artists were able to distribute their works rather inexpensively, but which is one reason why we have little. Naturally, for the Beats, it's very important to know about the beatniks, as most Americans have heard about that. And he relates beatnik to the story, I think most of us know of Kaufman and Kahn there, how that was a political statement as well with the Russian Sputnik at the same time. And obviously very important here as a background piece of information. And then loads of little beatnik sensationalism. The great American newspaper, the National Enquirer, that is a rag, of course. I was happier as a beatnik, and that's Streisand there. That's Barbara Streisand. It says it there, and I don't know. Yeah, it was in the 60s. It was in the 60s. And some various photos. I'll pass by those. There's Vesuvio's and Enrico's, all in that neck of the woods. These are all documents right there. So as you walk there, actually, you pass these restaurants. And if you know something about the Beats, then it's meaningful. But if not, they're just sitting on the wall, and you're wondering what the hell are they doing. This is an interesting book. Jesus Was a Beatnik. It's by it's a fairly rare book. It's by James Oakes Bryan. Classic. Well, I don't know how classic it was. But it relates Jesus as a beatnik. I don't think he's ever endorsed by the Beats itself. And for those who were, it should have been. And for those Americans who see Nick at Night or any of the old TVs, Max Schulman did a series called The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, which was the introduction of the Beats and the Beatniks to an American public on television, and also an introduction of Rodin's Thinker, if you remember it. This is some of the text from Jesus Was a Beatnik. They also have some of the books, and although they're pretty ratted up here, but covers. This one is particularly interesting on the Subterranean because when this was published, of course, in many of the states in the United States, it was illegal for a white man to marry a black woman, let alone to have an affair together. So the prurient affairs in the museum start to come out now because, after all, this is the Beat generation. It's all about sex and passion. Why not? That could have been Gone with the Wind as well. The illustration there. And we talk about Miss Lee and Forbidden Love there. And the place is salt and peppered with images of Mr. G. And this is a fairly famous one. And with some artwork. Jack Michelin. His name was Harold Silver, but Harvey, thank you, Harvey Silver. But he really liked Jack London, so he took the Jack, and there's a picture of him and a couple of watercolors. These are all very small. These two watercolors are about 18 inches high by about 10 inches wide. Photographs by Loomis Dean, both in Paris and in the States. The images fairly common, and you would know them, but they are not identified there. Two paintings by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I think he's a writer. One of the interesting features here of this photo that, by the way, all the photos were taken very quickly by me through immense protests by the owner of the museum, who didn't want them photographed. But yeah. I think yes. I think no is kind of a weasel word of some sort or other, so it's best to proceed that way. And then here's the background of the image. So you walk away from this place with a visual headache, those of you used to going to museums or organizations, and in some ways maybe that's great for the beats. These are untitled, as you can see. There is a section in there about the beats and how the beats relate to those who came before it. The beats and the classics, and this is all fairly familiar to you. And here's Ferlinghetti, and this is a surfboard with the ubiquitous sunflower on it. That was done by Ferlinghetti as well. That was rather nice to see. What would the beats put on their bookshelves? Well, I don't know that anyone ever actually went in and took a photo or counted the books on the bookshelves, but according to the Beat Museum, this is what you would have seen. Again, it's in order to put the beats in some sort of referential area. And there's a 45, and it's called, as you can see there, The Beats, by The Beats, and it's called the Beat Bounce. And it's pretty rotten, but that's okay. It's good for background. When you go downstairs, in another section downstairs, and you see some other beat poets and beat elements, and then you start seeing all those nice beat things for sale that you can buy, older and newer, etc. Now upstairs, you've got loads of photos, and we're upstairs again. Here is the Kerouac license plate from Colorado. And the more sensual or erotic issues are dealt with upstairs. So obviously our boys right here. And you go downstairs, and doesn't this just look like it could be a page out of the diary of Anna Frank? Anna Frank used to cut pictures from movies out, and sure enough, this was from the movie from Motorcycle Diaries and On the Road, and here's a 49 Hudson right there, replete with the dust from, I suspect, that has not been done yet. So this is actually in the museum. It does not smell of petrol, but
That's the part that's used in the movie.
it's right. And to put it in some sort of American context of the sale of the Hudson. And I'll end it with what you end here. I don't know. Let's see what you think about what Elvis was to music, and what James Dean and Marlon Brando were to film. The Beat Generation was to literature. And then you leave, and then you can buy all this stuff. And so the rest is right there. Now, not to miss a beat, the Beat Museum then does a number of marketing sequences themselves, and they have posters here for the Beat Museum. Sputnik lands in North Beach. Again, this is an ad for activity in the Beat Museum, which, by the way, even today, still today, has poets, very active poetry reading right there. Yeah. All the fun of being on the road without thumbing for a single ride. I don't know who the copywriter was for these. I think in the case of the poem Howl, the real obscenity was the government's reaction to it. I've read that other places, so I don't think that was a copyright. But these are all ads for the Beat Museum, and you will see this around San Francisco. And finally, for the younger audiences who know the game, you don't know Jack, which is a trivia game of some sort. You haven't visited the Beat Museum. If you haven't, then you don't know Jack. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you. Well, it was very nice.